Is The Last of Us TV show really as amazing as everybody is saying, or are we just so desperate for decent entertainment over the past few years that anything remotely good just seems spectacular now? Well, I'm going to let you guys know my thoughts. So let's go ahead and dive into this review of episode 1. I'm going to show some picture slideshows just because I don't want to be a talking head. And if you see me looking over to the right a little bit, it's because I'm checking my notes. I had a whole lot of thoughts. So let's start here with what we're looking at with the intro. So the intro just starts with like a 1960s type interview. And this scientist dude is basically talking about, hey, the potential of some sort of fungus infecting human beings and how that's not really possible though because of our body temperature, but climate change, basically if climate change happens, then who knows? And so I don't know, that part was just kind of cringe for me. And maybe I'm reading a bit too into it, but with all of the climate change stuff constantly thrown in our faces lately, I don't know. It did kind of make me like, okay. So anyway, fast forward. This show takes place. It starts here in 2003. Granted, in the game, if you played the original game, you'll know that it actually started in 2013. And then it like fast forwarded 20 years into 2033. But in this timeline, I guess they just wanted things to be more modern day. So they made it start in 2003 and then mostly take place in 2023. So not that much of a difference. I'm not that concerned about it. Now, I'm going to start my thoughts with the characters. At first, I just wasn't really sure. I wasn't really latching on to anybody in terms of just really liking a character a whole lot. They weren't quite as charming as what we're used to seeing in the original game. And when you think about Joel and his daughter Sarah's relationship, I don't like their dynamic in the show nearly as much as I liked it in the game. Now, obviously, we know she was casted a very different looking than how she looks in the game. So there's the obvious element there. But one of my biggest issues here is that she is almost too old. Like, she comes off as not very childlike, and even though she's supposed to be like a preteen and all that, preteens usually typically still act like kids, and it was just, she just kind of wasn't given that. She was too mature, and it also took away from the dynamic between her and Joel, her dad. I mean, just look, you can already tell just looking at them the big difference here. This looks like a little kid. She's 12 years old in this game, but she just looks like a little kid. She acts like a kid. She's very, she has like this childlike innocence to her, and it's just really sweet, lovable child. And I'm not going to say she was terrible. She's a good actress. She looks good on camera. And she did a good job with what she was given, but I don't like how they wrote her to be just too mature. It took away a lot of that dynamic. And speaking of the dynamic, mostly like between her and Joel, it had a bit of that, hey, I'm the smart kid, you're the dumb dad type thing, which I did not like at all. Because when you look at the actual game, right? In the actual game, Joel very much acts like her dad. The scene when they were on the couch and she gives him the watch and all that, he tells her, whoa, it's past your bedtime, girl. You need to go to bed. He still acts like her dad. And in this show, it almost is more like a sibling dynamic in a way. But even then, it's basically her just constantly like being sarcastic at him and him just taking it. He doesn't dish it back. He doesn't act like a dad really to her at all until crap hits the fan. But in their day-to-day life, it was just dumb dad, smart daughter. And so I don't know, it took away a lot of their dynamic. It also just took away that cute appeal from Sarah. She was just lovable and cute, and she had like a little bit of sarcastic jokes in her, but for the most part, you know, she was really sweet. Now, I did like this scene. I think they did a good job. This was the scene where she gave him the watch, and it was accurate pretty much to the actual original game where Sarah gave her dad the watch. They made the joke about, he's like, how'd you even get this money? And then she made the joke about, oh, I sell drugs. You know, so that was cute. The same joke that's in the original game. The difference here was that, you know, he didn't tell her, hey, girl, it's past your bedtime or anything like that. And until they started watching the show, because they're watching a TV show on this segment, and she kind of like cuddles up to him, I didn't feel any father-daughter dynamic at all until that one scene where she kind of cuddles up and falls asleep, you know, against him. And then that's when I was like, oh, okay, now there's a little bit of that. But before that, I just wasn't getting that vibe. And I'm telling you, like, as a daddy's girl, I just like, it's hard for me to relate. I love when stories do a good job with the whole father-daughter dynamic, just because, like I said, you know, my dad's my hero. So I just like to see that. And I just don't really feel like this is done well. I would, you know, I'll joke at my dad, or we'll like joke with each other and sometimes kind of like insult each other to a degree, but there's never at any point I would try to make my dad feel stupid. And I feel like that's kind of what happened here for a bit. It wasn't egregiously bad, but it was enough to where it's like, I don't know, I'm not really about this. And Joel is such a masculine character in the game, so that was a bit off-putting because he just wasn't. He's a lot more passive, you'll see, and you'll find a lot of the female characters, this is like a pattern. Don't respect him. But let's go ahead and continue. Let's talk about Tommy. This is Joel's brother, for the uninformed. I will say he stood out more than anybody in the entire show for me. I think he did a fantastic job. I actually liked Tommy better in the show than I did in the game. Not that he was bad in the game, but there's just, I don't know, dude, this actor just did a really good job. The character is just cool and funny and just likable. He is great. Now, he's not in the show that much. For those who know the actual story, he's not going to be in it that much at the start, especially, but I just thought he was awesome. Very good. Okay, so now let's talk about when the outbreak happened. Now, one of my concerns was that in interviews and stuff, they stated, hey, we're going to tone down the violence a little bit. And I'm just like, why would you do that in a movie that has, or a show that's based off a game that was extremely violent and centered around infected, aka zombies, right? But I will say that there was a pretty gruesome scene here, and here you see one of the infected, and yeah, she definitely is very scary looking. So they did a good job with that. Now, this scene, okay? I do want to clarify too, if you don't want spoilers, then go ahead and click off right now, because I'm about to get into some spoilers. I mean, a lot of people already know what happens in the actual game, so it's not going to be spoiler territory for you, but hey, go ahead and just watch the first episode if you want to check it out, but I'm going to talk about spoilers now. So let's talk about this scene, all right? This is the notorious, infamous scene of, you know, Sarah dying, and it was tragic seeing it in the game, made me cry in the game, and in the show they did an amazing job with it. I'm not even gonna lie, even though I don't really like how their dynamic was portrayed at the start. I will say that once crap hit the fan, and once, you know, Joel and Tommy, they get Sarah, they're in the truck, they're driving toward like the busy traffic, the car crash, like all of that was very accurate to what we saw in the first game, and it was done exceptionally well. You even see like a plane crash into the ground at one point, and the visuals, everything about it just absolutely top notch, fantastic, right? And then Joel finally, at this point, he manned up a bit, and I liked seeing that side of him. It was nice to see, because I was worried about him just being too passive the entire show, because that just doesn't really reflect Joel in the game. And so it was nice to see him finally man up a bit. Now this scene, they did great. It made me choke up, made me tear up. Fantastic job on this scene, which is a very critical and important scene. I think it would have been all the more impactful if they had the father-daughter dynamic even better at the beginning. But still, they had something, and there was still some dynamic there, and it still was very sad. I think once seeing him get very protective over her, once the infected, once the crap hit the fan, and seeing him be very protective over her, that's when I got more of a sense of, okay, this does feel a lot more like a father-daughter dynamic, and this part will just break your heart, of course. So, all right, now we're fast forwarding a little bit. This is where, like I said, there is a little bit of a time difference here. This is now modern day 2023 instead of being 2033, which again, not a huge deal to me. But when you're talking about notable characters, of course, I'm thinking Tess, right? Tess, I loved Tess in the first game. Absolutely loved her. She was feisty. She was tough. She had that tomboy vibe, but she was pretty, but she could hang, dude. Like she was pretty brutal. Now, I will say, in this interpretation of Tess, she definitely has a lot of the spunk and a lot of that feistiness that you would expect from Tess, right? But I will address the elephant in the room, not just with Tess, but with Joel and with Ellie as well. Those three, most importantly. I feel like with the casting, and I mean this in the nicest ways possible, but I feel like with the casting, they don't stand out visually, okay? And I'm not saying that every character has to look like a supermodel or anything like that. If you even look at the first game, they didn't look like supermodels, but they were very eye-catching, right? And in this case, with Tess, with Joel, with Ellie, they are not. They almost look like NPCs. And you know how, when you're playing like a Final Fantasy game or something like that, you can always tell the difference between main character and NPC. And that's something that you really see here. It almost makes me wonder, when you look at the Last of Us, the first game, the remake of it, it's like they intentionally made Tess look, they made her look less pretty in the remake than she looked in the original game, which, and same, and here we have Ellie right here. No shade to these actors. They are honestly really good actors, all of them. Very good acting in this show. But do the three mains just stand out? Not so much. So the thing is, though, Marlene, she is the same actress who played her in the game. So, of course, she does have that it factor. She pops really well on screen as well, I will say. But when you when you look at Tess and Joel in general, it's just, they pop. They stand out. And this goes for, actors in general, and I know a lot of TV shows and movies, especially, I feel like there is a less of a focus on this now, but used to, it's you wanted your actors to stand out on screen. Some people just stand out in front of camera more than others. Some people will look better on camera than they do in real life, or you might have someone who looks amazing in real life who doesn't look good on camera. There is just something about it that, like I said, I don't know. I just don't think that the three main actors that you see in this first episode here, Ellie, Tess, and Joel, they don't stand out. They look like NPCs, but their acting is really good. So I will give them that. It's just a stark difference because look how cool they look. Look how heckin' cool they look. And you don't get as much of that vibe in the show. I mean, also their dynamic and their chemistry with one another. And while everybody that is in this show, the acting is top notch and fantastic, the chemistry between characters I'm just not feeling. I think between most of the characters in general, they just don't really have much of chemistry. And in this case, with Tess and Joel, it's just not really believable that they have anything going on with each other. And it's not believable that they even know each other. It almost feels like they just met at this point, even though they've been working together and they know each other. Just a stark difference between what we see here. Something else too is they took away a lot of their edge as well. And this is a pattern that we see in games that are made for a modern audience or TV shows that are adapting games or adapting previous properties. You'll find with the good guys is that they do take away a lot of their edge. We see this with Lara Croft. She doesn't have her edge anymore, right? And so same difference here. In the game, they were smuggling weapons, right? They were smuggling guns. And this Robert guy, she just shoots him because he didn't deliver, right? They don't do that in the show. Their edge is gone. They don't do that. First of all, they're not smuggling guns anymore. They're smuggling a car battery, trying to sell a car battery. And I don't know for sure if this is like an anti-gun thing and that's why they changed that, or I don't know. It's kind of a lot to just look into just based off that. But I will say, like, while we do see Joel pick up a gun at one point later here, he doesn't get a gun at the beginning. And at the beginning, like when the outbreak first happened in the game, he pulled out a gun from his drawer. He already had a gun. I mean, the dude's a Texan, right? He already had a gun and he took it, and you don't see that here. Instead, his brother Tommy still had his gun, but instead Joel was holding a giant wrench. Again, can't quite say it's totally anti-gun, but it makes you wonder. But okay, let's go back to their dynamic here as well. I don't like it as much because they feel a little less like partners in business and stuff, and more like Joel almost is just constantly, what do we do next? What's next, Tess? All right, what's the plan? What's the plan, Tess? She called too many of the shots. And obviously in the first game, it's not completely out of character for Tess to make some decisions or call some shots. In the first game, Tess convinced Joel to continue on with the mission, for example, and he carried on and he was convinced. But the difference here is he didn't look to her as his authority. He didn't look to her as the boss. They worked together. They were more like equals. And in this case, it's just like, it almost feels like, okay, she's calling all the shots. She's the boss. He's like, what's next? What about next? What do we do? Tess, what do we do? And again, he's falling into a very passive role at this point, which I don't like to see with Joel. It's not egregious, but when you've played the game, now if you haven't played the game, you might not notice any of this stuff. But if you've played the game, it's obvious, okay? Now, there's a bit of here is where, Marlene tells Joel and Tess, okay, I need you to escort Ellie to this group of fireflies, as we saw from the game. But in this case, in the game, it was like, okay, you do this and I'll give you your guns and I'll pay you extra. That was their motivation. But in the show here, instead, she tells them, hey, get Ellie to this group of fireflies and I will provide you with a working vehicle so you can go find your brother, Tommy. So there's a bit, slight change, but still overall on point with what the story in general the message, the actual story. It's pretty accurate. Again, Marlene, I think, was great, but, she played her in the game, so it's expected. That's what we would expect. Okay, so anyway, from here, they continue on their journey. All right, they continue ready for this escort mission, right? They get stopped by a guard. And now in the game, it was 2 guards. This case, it was 1. Not a big deal. Still very accurate with the game story. He's checking them to see if they're infected. Ellie panics, grabs her switchblade, stabs him in the leg. This problem happens. Now, I liked this scene. I actually liked this scene better than what the game did, because in this case, and this was a moment where Joel got to redeem himself a bit in the show, not in the game, in the show, because in the game he's strong, he's he takes charge. In the show, he's falling into a passive role sometimes. It's like he'll be passive, and then they'll give him a moment where it's like, okay, he redeemed himself, and then he falls into a passive role again. And you'll find the female characters don't respect him. Even Ellie, who is just she respects Tess, but not Joel at all. And so then he has this moment here where the guard is pointing the gun. He has like a flashback, thinks about what happened to his daughter, and this time he's like, okay, I'm gonna do something. And he just sees red, punches the dude's face in, like, savage, brutal. Okay, and that was cool. I liked that. And it's nice to see Joel have a moment of taking charge. But again, he's fallen in that passive role multiple times. If it wasn't for these moments, like when the outbreak first happened, and here when he just saw red, started punching the guy's face in, then I think that this would be a complete mockery of Joel's character. But they do redeem it a little bit. And this is where he has that flashback. All of a sudden he's like, whoa. And then he just goes crazy on him. All right. So then, of course, the episode, okay, here I'm getting ahead of myself. So then the episode ends with Joel, Tess, and Ellie, walking forward, moving forward. They already took out that guard, he took out the guard, and then they're continuing on their journey. So, final thoughts is that this show, in terms of production quality, is top notch. The actors are incredibly talented. While I don't think all of them pop on screen necessarily or have the aesthetic that really does pop on screen, they still are good at acting. The effects are really good. The overall production quality is a lot better than what we're used to seeing, especially in terms of video game to TV show or movie adaptation. But I mean, the game already had such a solid and incredible story that it would be tough to mess it up in terms of actual writing, because you got great source material right there. I do feel like with a lot of the marketing and the interviews, they led us on to believe that it wasn't going to be accurate, and it honestly is a lot more accurate than I anticipated. I do feel like some of the characters could be better, and I'm struggling to even latch on to a character and really like a character, which is a stark difference between the actual game. Because with the original game, it was just like all of the characters pretty much were stupendous. And in this TV show, the only one that really stood out, like, yes, I love this character, was Tommy, Joel's brother. But otherwise, it's just like, do I like the characters? Yeah, they're pretty likable, but I'm not really like that invested in these characters at all. They just lack that chemistry, and they lack the charm that the first game had with the characters, in my opinion. Now, I'm seeing a ton of people compare this to Walking Dead for some reason, probably just because of the zombies, or AKA walkers and infected, right? So I don't even know how anyone could compare the two, because The Walking Dead is leaps and bounds infinitely better. The first episode had me on the edge of my seat. The characters are extremely likable. I mean, dude, You had Rick here, you had Daryl, you had Michonne, just so many amazing characters, and they popped on screen. And the thing is, I know some people are going to be up in arms and just be like, oh, why does not everybody has to be hot? Not everybody has to be hot. It ain't even about that, because you even look at someone like Dale on this show, which I don't have a picture right now. But Dale, like, you had characters on The Walking Dead who weren't conventionally attractive, but they still pop on the screen because they just got the look that translates really well on screen, where they look like a main character and they don't look like an NPC. So I don't know. That's a big gripe, and people may think it's trivial and stupid, but I don't care. The Walking Dead had that it factor with their characters. That was what was so amazing about The Walking Dead, is that the characters really stood out. Love them or hate them, they stood out. Now, they did have some insufferable characters. When you look at Rick Grimes' wife, I couldn't stand the girl. But hey, overall, very, very strong characters in terms of, like, they leave an impact on you. Again, love them or hate them, they leave an impact on you. They had great chemistry with each other, and their dynamic with each other was played really well. And the first episode, and honestly, the first like 3 or 4 seasons, just had me on the edge of my seat. Now, it did go dramatically downhill, and I even quit watching it because it got stupid. But the way that it started, that first season, the first 3 seasons especially, but I mean, even the first episode, I was on the edge of my seat. I was like, oh my, what is going to happen next? I do not get any of that out of The Last of Us here. I don't relate to people who are saying this is even on the same level as The Walking Dead, let alone better. It's just like, are we that hurt for entertainment that you forgot how good The Walking Dead's first season was? I don't know. Anyway, I'm kind of a Walking Dead season 1 through 3 simp, so it is what it is. But yeah, overall, if I didn't play the game already and wasn't curious about how they would portray the story, I would probably tune out after the first episode. I would probably give it, maybe 1 or 2 more episodes to see if it's something that I could get into. But would this have had me just on the edge of my seat and excited for another episode? No, I did find myself bored for a good 30 to 40% of the entire episode. I think that there were moments that were just spectacular, but there also were moments that were kind of a bore. They took away a lot of Joel's and Tess's edge, which I don't like. And yeah, I just don't think that the characters overall were done that much justice. Some of that has to do with writing, and some of that just has to do with who they casted, because I don't think that the casting was that good on either of the main 3 characters here on this first episode, I will say. But all in all, if I have to give it a rating, I would say 7 out of 10. It's good, but it's not nearly as amazing as everybody is letting on. In my opinion, I think that we are just so hurt for entertainment because we have so much garbage out there right now that just something good is refreshing. So this is definitely a whole lot better than most anything else you're gonna find right now. It's definitely worth a watch to see if you like it, but do I think that this is as amazing as a lot of people are letting on? No, not even close. All this made me want to do was watch the first 3 seasons of The Walking Dead again, more than anything else. And it made me want to play the game again, which I'm kind of over it with the cinematic games, as y'all know. But I have to give credit where it is due. The Last of Us, the first game, had an amazing, really good story. So, I mean, it's no wonder they adapted it on a TV show. But unfortunately, it's not as good. It's not the characters. That's the biggest thing for me, is that the characters are so much better in the game than they are in the show. And so I find that pretty important. But anyway, there you have it for my review of the first episode of The Last of Us. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching. I will catch you next time. And in the meantime, go boom.